Good morning.
Hey, John.
Gonna get the right camera.
You got the pyramids, huh?
Oh yeah. Went there just before the Arab Spring.
Oh, wow. They must have been really something.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, it looks when you're up close, you can see the blocks, but from far away, it really looks like a pile of rocks,
Wow.
pebbles. But you get up close and you realize that all these 2.5 ton blocks are just stacked up just right.
Cool. Yeah, someday maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's getting safer now.
Yeah.
Go back.
Hmm. Cool. Well, Pat's slowly connecting. Seems like he's doing some delay. Oh, there he is. Okay. Hi, Pat. So,
Okay,
I can't hear you very well.
I hear you now. Hello.
Yep.
Morning, Pat.
Good morning, John. What's that behind you?
The
Is that
great
real? Is that real or is that a green screen?
uh it's a real picture I took.
Oh, great.
So, let's
Did
see.
you go in?
We went in the smaller of the two. We did get tickets to go into the big one. And the first time in my life I ever had a sense of claustrophobia
I
because
was going to say, what was that like?
the tunnel, I don't usually get claustrophobia, and I've gone on a lot of these trips. But in this case, you're in a tunnel. It's 4 feet high and about 4 feet wide.
Wow.
It's going down. There's a wood plank, so you're not slipping, and then handles. But there are a ton of people in front of me and a ton of people behind me.
Mm.
And
What,
I got a little tight about that. But once you get in, then you see the main chamber and there's nothing else to see. And then I scampered out.
I don't see how spelunkers do it in caves,
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, underwater.
where you have
Oh,
to wiggle through some hole to get to it.
yeah,
Hmm. Right.
that is, yeah,
With only a vague
unbelievable.
clue what might be on the other side. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Squid that the stories of people like squeezing through cracks, without knowing what's on the other,
Right.
it's just
Yeah.
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, just the thought is terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark is here. Hey, Mark, you're here and you're Mark. So
Yeah.
you're on a different computer apparently, right? Oh, you're muted. Can't hear you. You're muted.
There.
There you go.
Speak. Yes.
Yeah.
We're up north, about
Ah.
40 miles from Duluth.
Oh, wow. Cool. Cool. With a
This
little
is
fire. Yeah, a little actual fire in the background.
Yeah, that's
Nice.
right. This is our cabin. This is my writing space, which is um is a 3-season porch that we put a little stove in, so I can tolerate it down to probably 0
Mhm.
outside.
Wow.
Dan, you
Excellent.
mentioned one time you had a pellet stove you had to feed, and I saw a picture of it. And there was no stovepipe. How does that work?
No, this isn't a pellet. No, that's not me.
Yeah,
No, I've got a pellet stove. Yeah, I've got
Yes.
I've got a pellet stove over. I don't know if you can see it. It's the white thing there beyond the plants, and it's running right now. It's actually just got a straight pipe that goes out
Straight back.
out the back wall. Yep, and into it just goes straight through the wall, and it extends about, I don't know, 3.5 feet beyond. But it's almost like a dryer vent kind of a thing.
You must have researched putting that in as opposed to something else.
Yeah, I have a yodel in the house that an actual wood stove that I haven't used in the last couple of years, but we used to, primarily heat with that. I used to go through like
Wow.
7 cords of wood
Oh,
a
wow.
winter. But yeah, it got to be a little bit much.
Is it efficiency, cleanliness?
It was, well, it was sort of messiness, right?
Yeah.
It was, there was a lot of carrying too, because it's down,
Oh, sure.
we're in a split entry house. And so to carry it through the garage and through the, kind of the basement door, down some stairs, I had wood. One winter, I piled all the wood in the garage, and we didn't use that garage. But for the most part, I had it outside, and so that was kind of messy. My wife was kind of lobbying for one of those outdoor
The big ones you put out with the big logs, right?
one of the boiler systems. But I didn't want to, I'm thinking 10, 20 years. Maybe I shouldn't be, but I was thinking of myself as, an old guy having to get up in the middle of the night and, throw another 4-foot log on the thing.
Well, that's what I've always wondered about those. What is one of those logs that the size those things take weigh?
It depends. I mean, if they're wet, or if they're, I guess, hardwood, an oak, a 4-foot oak log, could be, that could get heavy.
It just seems like,
I grew up with wood stoves. The only heat in the house, there was a kitchen stove, and then there was a log stove in the living room. And we had to fill up the woodshed for the winter. We had to cut our own wood with a buzz saw, drag it down from the woods with a tractor. And so
we have 4 acres of land here. It's all wooded. And when I'm getting to the age, I'm making similar decisions. When we first moved, we would cut, down trees and stuff and then dry it. And, in Wisconsin here, you can get a logging permit for $40. And I think you can harvest, you have to go to designated areas that have already been commercially harvested. You can supposedly get 10 cords or something. We did that for a little because I have a little ATV I can run out, but I'm getting lazy now. And so we bought this last set of wood, and we don't really heat here with that. It's just, well, I grew up with the same thing. My dad, though, had a bright idea. I lived on an Iowa farm, and we used to shell corn, and you get these, piles of the cobs. And the house we were living in, and this is back in the 50s, they used to, dump coal in the basement and then burn coal. But my dad decided he could just dump the cobs down there. And then we had a pot-bellied stove in the kitchen, and the kids' job, my job and my brother's job, was to run down in the basement with 5-gallon pails, scoop up a pail full of corn cobs, run back up to the kitchen, and that was the fuel. It doesn't last very long. Corn cobs.
They're light. They burn fast. It's funny. We, a lot of my neighbors, get, uncut, logs and, 10-foot. And then, so then there's that whole thing of, cutting them to length and splitting them. And, if you're especially if you're using them in an indoor stove. So this, I go to the fleet store and buy, 20 bags, 40 pound bags of pellets at a time. And that lasts me. It does, it's a nice, it's nice to see flame. I like that. That's been a really kind of fun, I've got my armchair down there that I can, kind of sit in front of the fire and all that. So that's kind of fun. It is getting cold here. So I think we had this past week, we had our last few kind of Indian summer, I guess you might call it, kind of days. So maybe, it's about almost 10 past. So maybe this is the group we're going to have today. So we want to talk about this kind of conclusion to rank, in which he spends a lot of time quoting himself. And then I looked at the appendix, and it's like all him too. It's like, oh, okay.
Really?
So this is sort of an anthology of stuff he's been thinking about for a long time, I guess, which is fair when you think about it. So, I guess, and maybe before that, I've been having these conversations on email with Scott Scheper, and he has made he sent me a PDF and a Mobi file of a Kindle version of the book, and it kind of looks interesting. He's unsurprisingly, it's opinionated and kind of brash, and he argues strongly for his case, but I think he actually did some homework and sort of looked into kind of some of the background of these, and really, I guess, tried to reverse engineer Luhmann's actual Zettelkasten. So just kind of, I haven't started reading it yet, but I've sort of blasted through, and looked at kind of section heads and things like that. And it looks interesting. It's, almost 700 pages long. So it'll take, 11, 12 weeks to probably get through.
That sounds interesting to me. I mean, if you had to describe it, the history of Luhmann versus, the science or whatever perceived science of the Zettelkasten, where along that continuum is it more history or more writing?
I think it's
from
probably
notes?
I just based on kind of a preliminary look at it, I'm guessing it's more Zettelkasten technique and sort of supplemented by maybe 20 to 30% kind of history. He does say that he says that he talked with Luhmann's youngest son and stuff. So far, I've only seen sort of one reference to that conversation where, Luhmann didn't want to drink wine or something, didn't want to drink alcohol, and occasionally had a glass of red wine, which is sort of like, okay, interesting, but sort of not relevant.
It sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. So my thought is it will take 3 weeks off and then kind of come back and Scott says the book actually, the physical book drops December 6th. So and I had sort of said, well, if we started on December 3rd, which would be 3 weeks, which would be after a 3-week break. I sort of invited him to come and sort of sit with us and sort of talk us through, give us a little, a little kind of option for a Q&A and maybe, sort of tell us what was in his mind as he was doing it. And he said he's really not going to be available till after mid-December. So I guess what he did offer though was that everybody can have a PDF and a Kindle, a Mobi file. I can just distribute this to to people who are going to be reading along, and we can start on that. Even if we do, I'm going to get a print copy, I guess, just to have in my in my collection. But I probably will actually read it and
12 weeks. I
Sorry?
would say 12 weeks is a rather large amount of time to spend on
A book.
on that subject. I would suggest at least doubling up on the chapters.
Okay. That
Are
would
you
make
thinking
it
about how long it would take per week to prepare, or what?
Well, that's the thing. If we double up on the chapters, I think there are 22 chapters. So I mean, we're still talking about 11 weeks.
Yeah, I have trouble imagining what he can say on the subject of Luhmann's technique and using numbers and letters to assign to your Zettels.
For 700 pages?
I can see advantages of the technique, but I don't know. I can't see 12 weeks worth of it.
Yeah. Well, we could, that's an interesting point. Yeah. I mean, we could try to I mean, we could try to make it 8 weeks, and I can kind of go in and see if I can kind of cut it up into more into chunks that, you know, where we might want to read closely in some of the time and then just, you know, skim other things. Let me actually open up that email and see if I can just pull up a copy of the.
Tim is apparently with us, but not on screen because he's writing in the community forum.
No,
Tim is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he's in.
It says, so we wait for the PDF until 3rd-ish December for an intro by Scott, or do we get it earlier to read ahead if actually waiting at a true 700-page?
Yeah, we would get it early.
Published.
Yeah, let me see if, okay, here's the Google Drive. Let me see if I can just grab it again. I had forgotten I didn't do that. I didn't download it on this computer yet. I did that.
I assume Tim has internet problems and the video is too much for his carrier today, but he's with us.
He's in the, so he's in the vault. He's not on.
Not only in spirit, but writing on the wall.
Okay. All right, cool. Let me see if I can download this. Oops. Oh, okay. Google Drive is not something that I'm very familiar with, I have to say. I've always sort of avoided, you know, and it's kind of funny. It's ironic because I was sort of I was never a fan of Bill Gates, but somehow I don't see Microsoft as being, you know, quite as
evil.
as crazy as Google sometimes. Yeah. All right. So let me see if I can. So this is the thing. I think you should be seeing the.
No.
And yeah, so it's. I think I can probably, I mean, if the goal was to do it in like 8 weeks, I don't know if we could, I don't know if 6, I mean, 6 might work if we skim a lot. But
yeah, the chapters are uneven.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to kind of look in and actually sort of try to figure out which things we can jam together and you know, and what we might want to blast through and what we might want to actually spend some time on. I don't particularly, you know, this Hitchhiker's Guide to the Antinet apparently is, you know, a step-by-step, do this and then do this. And he's actually, you know, he's actually telling you to, you know, write a card that says this, which I'm not going to do, obviously. You know? So there will be parts of, so I guess what I can do is I can try to, you know, in the next week or so, I can try to kind of get a sense of, you know, what we might actually want to spend significant time on, and, you know, maybe devote a week to, you know, to something like, you know, like a couple of like chapter 2 and 3 together, you know, if he actually says some, you know, some interesting things about,
And I'd be interested if you were to combine your experience so far on Skrintle with this book and how Skrintle might be used to do the kind of things that Scott's doing with physical cards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's certainly going to be in my mind. You know, that's going to be one of the things that I'm, you know, that I'm sort of experimenting with. I've had pretty good luck so far in, although when I tried to demo it, that demo that I used for my last video, it didn't actually work, but I am having pretty good luck opening up a PDF and, you know, having it, you know, you can sort of have it in, you know, and the interesting thing is you can apparently have it in the thing that you export, right? So the nice, you know, the interesting thing about Skrintle is that you get a I guess now that I've shown this to you, you don't have to keep staring at it. The the board that you can export is really interesting in the sense that, you know, it can have, you know, that the viewer can kind of manipulate it, right? Can move things around on their, you know, on the thing, and it doesn't actually alter the board that I've published. They can't edit it, they can't add anything, but they can actually kind of go in and you know, follow these non-linear trails. And the thing that I am most interested in it for is that kind of non-linear element. Now, I have actually been, and maybe I'll share again, maybe I'll bring up my scribble board and share that. I have actually been trying to duplicate, here we go. This is my my primary source project, the thing that I'm using with my students, right? So this is, you know, sort of U.S. History 1, and this is just the very earliest, you know, this is like the first week, right, where I these are the primary sources, and then they link, you know, and then they have, you know, there's a little bit of media in there. There isn't any video in there yet, but I could put video in there. But then, you know, things link to each other, and actually that one was a link to a backlink, right? So that went back to the original card that I was looking at. But, you know, like this one, you know, Drake, you know, we've got, you know, I've got a little thing on him, I've got a thing on the Spanish Armada, I've got a, you know, so these little extra, you know, extra things, and then, you know, they're all, you know, kind of connected. So my hope is that, you know, that the students, you know, or viewers or whatever, will be able to sort of walk in kind of a non-linear way through these things, you know, see where, you know, Richard Hakluyt is, you know, and, you know, what John Smith is, you know, is doing. And then things like slaves, obviously they're just a couple of notes so far, but, you know, as we continue, there's gonna be more and more and more about, you know, the Atlantic slave trade and stuff. So that then when they, you know, if they were to go to, you know, if they were to, you know, want to say, okay, I want to see everything on Indians, right? So there'll be, you know, there'll be an opportunity to kind of go in and see everything, you know, to kind of follow these things either in the search or using the tags, or just kind of by following, you know, visually following along and moving. Oh, there's the Indian card, right? So that, you know, obviously that story will continue throughout the whole semester, and there'll be, you know, probably hundreds of cards that ultimately link to that. So that, I think, might be kind of interesting. I actually have, you know, in these things, I've actually got, you know, a numbering system already, right? Because I had been making, you know, I've got, you know, all of these cards. I've got 10 weeks of, you know, of cards at this point. This is just some of them, you know, with numbers, right? So each of the weeks is a different, you know, so this is history, North America. I don't remember what the 2 is, but the first, then, oh, this project, and then the first week, and then the numbering of the card. I don't know, you know, I kind of feel a little bit embarrassed that I wrote a book about this already. But it's, you know, it's work in progress. But I don't think I said anything that I would have to, you know, go back and apologize for or contradict at this point. I think I was general enough about numbering. It'll be interesting to me whether or not I kind of feel, you know, if I have a, you know, a box of cards and a you know, file cabinet of cards down the other end of the office, whether I feel I need to do that, or whether I feel comfortable that you know, that's going to be somehow captured in here. I suspect that I will want, my gut tells me that I will want to continue having a physical and a virtual card system, in Scrintl and on paper. And then that I will, and that I will want to number the cards, because the thing about Scrintl so far, it seems to me that, there are there are just cards. There are a lot of cards, right? And sometimes they find their way to boards, but they can be on multiple boards, right? And so I haven't completely gotten my head around that yet, around what that means. I think my instinct is that it is valuable, right? And that it's kind of interesting, but it's not the type of thing where there is a kind of an Obsidian like main graph that everything is in. I guess there is a potential to actually go here, grab all, select all the cards, drag them onto a board and see what that looks like. Right now, I don't think, and I've only got 1,500 cards. I don't think that would work. It might work in the future. I'm kind of following the Scrintl Slack, and they're saying, that like this week they said they made some major improvements, and especially with the the login, the moment when it sort of syncs with the server, and then also the saves and the pulls from the server. I don't know that means that it will accommodate a big thing like that. If I wanted to visualize 1,000+ cards simultaneously, I'm not sure about that. And also they've sort of hinted or semi-promised that they would that there would be a capability of full exports of boards and maybe the entire database to Markdown. And they also have kind of hinted that, like Obsidian, there might be an ability to use the app on a local database, which I think would be an advantage, because then I could have as much video as I wanted, and I can and as many images and all of that without either taxing their they haven't talked about any type of storage plans, and I don't know if it's part of their business model that they want to make money on on selling storage. It seems like not a great strategy, given the amount of iClouds and other Google Drives and things that are out there in the world. But it's also not 100% clear to me how the export, this export of the boards to something that people can view as a web-based thing would work if it were not on their server. So maybe that'll end up being a separate thing, like Obsidian Publish, which I haven't looked at Obsidian Publish since the 1.0, since the real product has been kind of nailed down. So I don't.
Well, the deal with the Obsidian Publish is mostly about, isn't it, situations in which the creator has a reason to share, like you would with a class.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah. Well, yeah, and I've been thinking that it might be, that as I'm doing research on something that's kind of like a long-term project, like maybe my, the pine, white pine lumber industry thing that I'm going to do. That's going to be, sort of a multi-year project, and it's going to extend from, the Atlantic Ocean to the Red River or whatever. So that might be, it might be fun kind of putting that up, doing that kind of as a garage door open sort of ongoing project. It seems to me, though, that even with the tabs and all of these different ability, this different ability to open links and kind of see things in Obsidian with publish, and I made I put a bunch of notes up and sort of separated them out into a folder and then published the folder, and that I was only kind of semi-satisfied with, because it seemed like there was a lot of work involved for the reader or the viewer or the browser, really. And I kind of imagine people as being sort of just semi-interested, right? Not as deeply interested in the topic as I am. And so not really thinking, oh, I have to drill down into this and I have to follow this and then I have to back out and then I got to follow this trail. And so this idea of having a board with all these things with little lines between them, sort of, and then at the bottom of each card having the list of links, sort of strikes me as maybe more user-friendly for the casual user. And having it, and having the interface kind of look like cards, have images, have maybe, audio files and videos and things like that on them. I don't know. It's, it might be, it might be just me, but I sort of like this, and this is something that I was looking for, 10 or 15 years ago, right? When I was doing I guess it was more like 12 years ago, when I was doing my research for my dissertation, and I was using Tinderbox, right? And I was making these little things, but then it was sort of like, well, okay, I have to, there is, it was just, and there were probably ways of doing that in Tinderbox, and to be fair, there are probably, interesting ways of doing some of these things in Obsidian that I'm just not aware of, because I'm not, really that interested in becoming a power user and, and learning to manipulate all these plugins and, and pick the right ones and set them up. And a lot of this, it's occurred to me a couple of times that a response to Scrintl might be, yeah, Zolt put all that in Excalibur, or in Excalibrain or whatever. But my reaction to that, nothing against, the good work that he's doing, is I don't care. It's not, in the same way, and it's kind of funny because Stian actually invited me to, to sort of alpha Tana, a long time ago. And I kind of installed it and played with it a little bit. And for some reason, it just didn't grab me. And, and I've been kind of feeling bad about that, and feeling a little bit guilty about that. And then, finally, I'm just sort of giving myself permission to like the things I like, and not really agonize over why. So I don't know. I like this.
It's also getting to the point that there are such a large number. They're all distinct, but maybe what you're talking about is to become an expert in any one system. You have to devote so much energy and depth to exploring and experimenting, and it gets to the point that there's just so many options. I just see so many things now that are, I'm kind of interested in the sharing opportunity. And I have kind of thought about my own motives, and part of it is, so I'm retired 6 or some years now, and I'm not in a community of colleagues anymore.
Mhm.
And I'm feeling that, right? I'm feeling left out, or lacking the opportunity to communicate and to learn from things that they're interested in. And
Mhm.
I don't know, I kind of see maybe some of these social platforms, because we all have that issue to some extent based on, the uniqueness of our interests.
Yeah.
Because you work at a small institution, I worked at a small institution. There are things we all talked about, but there also were things that they didn't care at all about that I was really interested in. So,
Mhm.
I don't know. I always thought that the sharing component was, that aspect of a lot of these new tools, or was where I saw some unique potential.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think part of it for me with all of these options is a kind of a, do people sort of lean into their uniqueness and kind of really focus on that and capitalize on that, or or do they then try to be everything to everybody, right? And I've noticed that a little bit in the Slack, in like the feature request thread in the Scribble Slack, right? People are asking for for PDF processing, PDF reading, and annotation capabilities, and it's sort of like, oh, we have tools for that. Should that be their, this is a small group of people, right? Should that be their first priority? Or, can we say, well, okay, you can use, there are a bazillion tools for that, right? You can use preview for that. You can use hypothesis if you wanted to save it and, and you wanted to get to, sweep it into, into Readwise and into Obsidian or something like that. So I'm concerned with a little bit with with sort of this everybody wanting to eat everybody else's lunch kind of thing, and I kind of understand from the business perspective that maybe there's a limited market for just this point of convergence. I think the Skrintl thing is, it's sort of like mind maps meet Obsidian in a way. And without the complexity of having to have data view, and then having to have Excalidraw and Excalibrain, and thing on top of thing on top of thing, and and that sort of complexity. But yeah, I would like to, and it's kind of funny because my in response to what you said, Mark, one of the things that has attracted me always to the web is that, locally, there's a small or non-existent, kind of set of people who are interested in the things that I'm interested in, right? But, I've always been like, especially, I've got 2 colleagues in the history department, and then a couple of other, and then 3 philosophers in this, larger, it's really a humanities department that includes a history program and a philosophy program. And they're all very interested in religion. Like they want to create a religious studies thing, that combines, and there's some people coming in from the English department too, and it's like, oh, it's time, this is, philosophy can lead to, they're doing like 3+2 programs with, seminaries down in the cities with Luther, and I think one of the other ones, United or whatever. And they're exploring these things, and it's sort of like, my thing has always been, my interest has always been secularism. Right? So I'm sort of like on the other side. I'm interested in religion, but from a completely different direction, and from kind of an antagonistic direction in some cases. But I've always been able to find those people out on the web, right? And to the extent that when I was researching Charles Bradlaugh, the guy who started the National Secular Society in London, there's a bar in Northampton, because he was the member of parliament for Northampton. There's a bar in Northampton called the Bradlaugh, which I was posting this stuff. I actually used to buy domains a lot. So I had a domain called bradlaw.com that I was posting a lot of my research and stuff on. And they contacted me and said, what is this? This is so cool. It's like, oh, really? it's a bunch of, but then from there, it was sort of like, well, there's a statue of Bradlaugh in Northampton. And on September 26th, his birthday, every year, a bunch of people from this bar go to the statue and, drink a toast to Bradlaugh. And among them is Alan Moore, the graphic novel writer, V for Vendetta and Watchmen and, From Hell and all that. So one year they sent me a picture of a newspaper clipping of, them, the photo of them all, in front of, raising their glasses in front of the big white statue of Bradlaugh, and they sent it to me and stuff. So, so that's always been sort of the beauty of, being able to access kind of a worldwide community. You can find your weirdo, friends out there somewhere. But yeah, it does seem like this capability of Skrintle to maybe publish out. I hope that they can. I'm sort of like biting my nails, hoping that they survive so that I can use this thing. So anyway, that was a long sort of digression from Poorly Understood. Do we want to go back to that?
One point before we start, I had this sense, reading these final 3 chapters, I guess, that I wish we're coming up on Tuesday, in which a lot of what I see as possible implementation is going to be in the balance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's kind of a helpless feeling at this point. Yeah, these are good ideas, and yeah, that's concrete, and that should happen. But then I have this sense, well, maybe this won't happen now for 6 more years, and I'll be gone by the time any change actually occurs. That was just kind of a gut reaction when I'm reading this stuff in my present state of mind about what the future holds.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good place to start, because I had an experience like that this week too. I was in my intro to equity class. We were talking most recently about sort of class and I had them read actually a section last week. I pulled a chunk out of here, had them read a piece of a chapter from Poorly Understood. And then also a piece of a chapter from Nancy Eisenberg's book, White Trash. And so, so sort of building on that this week, I had them read, Robert Reich has been putting some things up on Substack, right? He's got a Substack, and and nothing that is too far out there. But he does at least, so he wrote this 2-part thing, and I had them read the second part of it. And he does sort of call attention to, he's trying to kind of myth bust a little bit, right? And say, it's not really just a culture war. And it's not just, it's not just about, sort of the undeserving, poor or that sort of thing, and he points to some, and he kind of bugs me because it's like he kind of gets it, but then he sort of veers off into making these weird excuses for for how it's really Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin's fault, right? And I was like, really, dude? But yeah, it was a similar thing. It was sort of okay, having just been talking about this, sort of throughout the semester, we're coming up to, to voting, and, and what do we do? And does it have any type of point? Is there a point of contact? And is there a point of leverage? So, yeah, Pat, that was kind of Reich's point, was that a lot of this is sort of myth making for the, for the purposes of kind of continuing this status quo, pitting the bottom 90% against each other so that they wouldn't look up and say, where's all the money going? Because he's, one of the statistics that he cites is that, over the last 40 years, like $5 trillion has been sort of taken from the bottom 90% and, and sort of given to the top 10 and mostly the top, 10th of 1%, really.
50 trillion.
Sorry?
50 trillion.
50 trillion, was it? Okay. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I say 5 trillion was just during COVID, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so frustrating because the use of these myths to avoid confronting the reality of at least 50% of our population. And I think increasingly what we've seen since 1980 is the so-called former middle class is trending towards the bottom 50%. And that's why you've got a whole bunch of college educated people in the Midwest primarily, or a lot, who are seeing their lifestyle going downhill and they're mad as hell about it.
Mm-hmm.
What the Republicans have done is they've captured that. Trump in particular has captured that. He's done a terrific job in accentuating those conditions and those fears and saying to those people, I'll fix it. Only I can fix it. And they said, oh, okay, Savior, fix it for us. And what's he do? He puts in a huge tax cut for the 1%.
Right. That's the way I read
all these guys in Congress like Johnson and like Scott from Florida, where I live, who want to cut out Social Security. And I'll tell you, if they start cutting out Social Security and it cuts out my Social Security, I'll be picking up a gun and go looking for somebody.
Yeah.
When J.D. Vance wrote Hillbilly Elegy, that was why I understood his message to be, because the book was kind of about, well, these people should all be Democrat, but they're not. They're all frustrated, and they're turning their frustration. That's what Trump tapped into.
Right.
And then, of course, it's just astounding to me that after reading that book and being, that makes sense, and then to have Vance kind of end up pursuing the same path to some extent.
Yeah.
Well, no, in between his childhood and writing the book, he became a venture capitalist, made a lot of money, and changed the viewpoint. And I understand if you're very rich that you want to change things so that you continue to get richer and richer,
right? And
you really lose the caring about anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's kind of weird, that people like, Nick Hanauer too, right? Become kind of, they're billionaires, but now they want to be socialists, or, of a type. And I don't want to, it's been a while since I've listened to any of his podcast stuff, but I don't want to completely write that off. But on the other hand, is that about, sort of really opening this up, or is that more about, sort of directing this change? The college educated, the non-college educated people, especially the people in the flyover area and the appeal of Trump, one of the things that sort of strikes me is that, and Reich did sort of kind of call out Obama and Bill Clinton on the issue, and he did point out that, in the last 26 years, Democrats have been in the White House for 18, and we've had, control, Democrats have had control of the Senate and the House and not done anything. And so that's problematic.
Yeah, I found that interesting too.
Yeah. I mean, there's an argument to be made that, that Clinton didn't create these conditions, that sort of led to NAFTA and stuff. He embraced them, right? But somebody you could argue that this was inevitable. This is globalization. This is going to happen. You can't have union car jobs at $34 an hour when people in Korea or someplace else who are making $12 an hour are building equivalent products or better products, right? And so there's got to be some type of meeting in the middle. But that was also what what's his name, the little billionaire guy said, Ross Perot. Right. Yeah. He said that, it will meet in the middle, but in the meantime, what you're going to hear is this giant sucking sound, right? As people, cross the border into Mexico and set up maquiladoras. And that was what happened. And so Clinton kind of presided over that and embraced it, but kind of promised along the way that that these people who are losing these $34 an hour UAW jobs were going to get some type of support to find something else to do. They were going to get retrained. Everybody, at the time, everyone was going to learn to code, and that was going to make everything perfect. But none of that actually panned out. So we had the contraction without the support. So you're muted again, Mark.
Got it. Messed it up. I'm getting confused. If you look at the issues, raised, things to be accomplished in the last chapter. Mm-hmm. One is the safety net, and you could argue that Obama did accomplish that to some extent, but that was like the end, and then he got shut down. Your comment about Clinton, Obama having the opportunity, I don't remember enough about Clinton. I didn't pay much attention, but Obama I did, partly because I was interested in the healthcare thing and denial of access to insurance in particular, because of a family situation. But it's like that other, they only let you get away with so much. And then if you are kind of successful, there's always another side, another perspective that can be played upon to limit the damage, so to speak. So the idea that anybody's going to get in there, I think any group, leader and constituency, you have to be kind of what word to use, maybe it doesn't seem to go as far as you would hope it would, because there always seems to be forces that move things back and cut it off. And if you can get one big thing done, it's almost like that's all you're going to get away with.
We're facing that right now. Biden, with his Build Back Better program, was really aimed at a lot of these things of putting in place things that would help the lower echelons. Take infrastructure. Everybody talked about infrastructure. Republicans talked about infrastructure for how many years? Decades. Mm-hmm. But they didn't do anything. Well, at least Biden got something done. But now here we are facing an election in a few days, 4 days. And what are all the Republicans saying they're going to do? They're going to undo everything Biden did. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to impeach him.
Yeah, just as a tactic based on nothing.
And just based on nothing. Yeah.
43% of the American electorate could say, right on.
Yeah. Well, it's like, if you can impeach our guy, we can impeach your guy.
Right.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Right. Well, and it would seem like, if you were going to do something, maybe trying to invoke the 25th Amendment might be smarter, but that's not the point. So we've got, part of it seems to be, we've got these huge bills, these omnibus bills, right, that have so much in them that nobody understands, and they're that thick and nobody reads them, right? And then even after they're voted on, they can be altered, right? I mean, if they're voted, they're passed, they can still, before they actually go into effect, can be really pretty substantially changed. So there's no accountability, and it seems, I mean, it almost seems like a death by 1,000 cuts in kind of the administrative state, and and maybe it's pointless to try to trace that and see how it happened. I would imagine it probably happened, by way of people shifting work to other people, right? People shifting, the actual reading of bills to staffers and to, and then ultimately to lobbyists, right? The reading and writing, it's, oh, hey, we'll take care of that for you. Don't worry. Go out and do your fundraising, because it's all, it's a constant fundraising thing, right? So people,
Right.
So that the politicians are focusing on not substantial issues, but visible and emotional and resonant issues, right? That like the 43% that just want to see an impeachment because they did it to our guy, so we got to do it to theirs.
Well, it's kind of interesting. You mentioned that Trump had captured something from a certain group of people, and but it's curious, right? One of his biggest promises 6 years ago was the wall.
Mm-hmm.
He sort of explained in simplistic terms that the wall is going to solve all our problems on the southern border.
Mm-hmm.
And people bought that hook, line, and sinker. So he fails to actually complete the wall. But people are tired of that, and they still don't blame him for failing at the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And then other private citizens set up a fund to build some wall, which is how do private citizens build a wall on other people's private property? They have no public domain, kind of eminent domain process. How is that going to happen? And how do we cross rivers with a wall? I mean, the simplest idea, wait a minute, tell me, how would you do that? And of course, it led to extreme fraud, which people are being convicted for.
Yeah.
So, and then Trump is not linked to any of that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
So what was it? Just a pretty story that people bought into and never really expected results? Yeah. It's quite curious. And of course, his major things affected no one that he was targeting in his campaigns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did seem like a series of kind of symbolic gestures.
Yeah.
And he's he's operating in the world of archetypes and not of objects or something. But one of the things that strikes me too is that, I mean, Trump was an anomaly, right? Trump was unexpected, right? The thing that should, quote unquote, have happened is the thing that happened to Bernie, right? There's a challenge from the fringe from the outward fringe of the party, from the right of the Republican Party, from the left of the mainstream Democrats, with Bernie. And Bernie is defeated, right? Bernie is basically he has his teeth pulled, and that is what should have happened by rights with Trump. Trump was just unwilling to accept defeat, right? They claimed, in the same way that they had done with Bernie, right, in the primary process and the convention, they claimed that they had beaten him, and he just said, "Nuh-uh," and kept going. So that really is kind of a strange, short-circuiting of the actual process, which I think excited a lot of people, right? That Trump had actually been able to break the system. Excited a lot of people who felt that the system wasn't working for them, and it was, and it was completely corrupt. So why shouldn't it be broken?
Well, you have to think of the French Revolution. I mean, basically, you had a few nobles and the king and queen who had all the wealth, and the rest of the people were just peasants who had to work and produce things and barely survive. And eventually they said, the hell with that. and I think the parallels both there and more recently in Germany in the 1930s, where enough people were desperate by their outlook and their condition that they said, somebody came along and said, oh, hey, I'll fix it. And they said, right on, we're with you. And that's where this country is poised, I think, at this point.
Well, that could be scary. The connection to, or the analogy with Weimar Germany is scary, is chilling, right? Because at the same time that they had this very chaotic government and fiscal, thing, they also had this very sort of chaotic but open social thing, right? So that then when the backlash comes, it links this political and economic change with a return to much more conservative, much more traditional, much more authoritarian values, right? And let's get rid of this free love. Let's get rid of all of this, gender bending, kind of cabaret culture that's going on, which may or may not be, they claim it's a symptom of this political moral decay, right? But is that the way people are going to look at the present moment 20 years from now?
Well, the techniques are the same as they were then. Look at those people over there. Those people, those Jews, those gypsies, those degenerates, those malformed people, they're the problem. They're pulling down your life. If we get rid of those, then everything, and when we maintain our purity, then everything will be fine. And enough people said, well, okay, go ahead, let's do it. And that we all know the result. And we have the same kind of propaganda going on now, pointing out the fingers in the same directions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's, hi, Louis. We're sort of talking about Weimar Germany right now.
Right.
And connecting it to the present American political situation. But I guess it applies also to Europe, to all this openness anxiety, right? The other thing that Reich had mentioned in his, the things that he's arguing against, that he frames this article in the second Substack article about, was this idea that somebody wants to think that this is, the anxiety of middle-aged, middle-class white dudes who see, people of color and people of difference in racial, ethnic, gender kind of categories, gaining more access to platforms, right, and gaining more ability to kind of move the discourse. And the thing that I think was unresolved in that article was whether this is real or whether this is the distractor that takes our eyes off of what the people, that takes the eyes, that takes the attention of the bottom 90% and, and off of what is going on above them and pits them against each other. And I don't know, to go back to what you were saying, Pat, I don't know if that was, how that operated in Weimar Germany either, but go ahead, John.
Well, I was just going to say, I was going to relate it to the book and just take child poverty and the cost, he said, of child poverty in the long run, from incarceration to emergency healthcare, et cetera, was, I think he said 4 times what if you spend it on the front end for various programs, you could prevent all that. But that seems to be an intellectual exercise to be able to make that inference. That's going to save you money in the long time, because of all these stereotypings and the fear that the bottom is going to equal you somewhere. It's mind-boggling that you can't look for the greater good of the society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because of these things, which was the point of the book, right? All the stereotypes prevent rational thinking about this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, when you talk about these kinds of causes, is it that these are just happenstances, or is there a notion that there are some who are manipulating these things? I guess that's the point. Is this purposeful?
Mm-hmm.
Or are these factors just working the way they work?
Mark, what are you referring to?
Well, I mean, the whole notion of if you assume that the ultra wealthy benefit from all of these things, the animosity that's been created within the bottom whatever percentage, and this has created this kind of circumstance where nothing ever gets done and resolved, and progress can't be made.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference, I think, between assuming somebody is controlling or some group is purposely investing to manipulate, and the fact that these factors just end up working that way.
Yeah. But would you agree that if you are an organization or like a Heritage Foundation or a
Right.
Cato Institute or a Hoke Foundation, right? And you find yourself in a situation. I mean, they seem to be very well positioned to be opportunists, right? And to take advantage of anything that happens and spin it and explain it. I mean, it seems like they have it does seem like the right has done a better job than the left in creating a capability, and maybe I'll withdraw that. I think they've both done a pretty good job in creating a capability to explain whatever happens to their own constituencies, at least. The question is, does it grab the uncommitted people? And I think that's where the Trump anomaly kind of comes in, right? Is that, and especially after Bernie, because I really think, I think there's been some people, with numbers, and I think that there hasn't been enough study of it, but it does seem to me that that after Bernie was pushed out, that a lot of those, a lot of people who were really disaffected, who were never going to vote in the middle, decided to go with Trump as a protest vote.
We know the Koch brothers invested heavily in climate change deniers.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So much so they invested so much in PBS that they controlled some of the programming, say on Nova,
Mm-hmm.
that they couldn't present programs on climate change.
Yeah,
So
which is ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they had a tremendous amount of power to not deny that they used.
Yeah. Yeah. And just that, I mean, and when you think about it, it's so easy just to move, because the strategy wasn't to disprove it necessarily. It was to, to do all of that, and Naomi Oreskes, does a good job in kind of tracking all that. Just to say, well, the science isn't completely in yet, right? And and we're not 100% sure. I saw one of my Substack feeds, and I didn't read the article, but I saw that somebody was writing about how a guy that has been a big journalist who's been a big climate change denier has just, gone to Greenland or something last week and has said, "Oh my God, I guess it's for real." And I guess climate change is real. But then, when you dig into it, everything that he's saying is kind of in line with what the petroleum industry is saying. So the petroleum industry seems to be trying to make this soft pivot from it wasn't, it's not real at all to it's real, but and actually control the, now that they apparently feel that they can no longer control the, can outright deny, right? Because they've lost that, now they can somehow control the discourse about, okay, so how much is it and what are we going to do about it? And so this was kind of a takedown of this. I should read it, when I have a free minute, because it did seem like it was an interesting sort of response to this guy saying, well, yeah, thanks for for admitting what we all knew, but don't think you're going to get away with, with now sort of being the spokesperson for what we should do about it.
Yeah, it was like the tobacco. It's all correlational. It's not causal. And what did it take to actually turn the tides? Internal memos that they acknowledged the truth. So it wasn't about the truth. It wasn't garnering the complete evidence. It was an internal memo.
Yeah, and I don't think that really worked in the case of. I mean, because we have the internal ExxonMobil memos, saying, from decades ago, saying, yeah, this is real, but let's, if we buy ourselves 20 years, we can make X amount of money. So, yeah. So anyway, hi, Lewis. we just sort of kept going. What do you want to throw in?
Yeah, I was wondering about this. It's happening in Europe, of course, as well, and in the UK especially, but this kind of like right versus left. I mean, it does seem like that part of the problem is that like reality has split between these two camps, and so what's the quote is like comment is free but facts are sacred. And we have like facts that are also like movable now, so like and of course it goes back to interwar Germany too. Like that's one of the reasons that Hitler got into power. He the big lie was that Germany was on its knees in the end of the First World War. Actually the German army was fine, and this was the lie, right? So
Yeah.
And that they debased the German people, and so Germany should go back to the top of the table and be feared and respected. So I feel that like this is why we're at the comparison with this time as well is quite accurate. Perhaps we have to be careful.
The American politician Daniel Patrick Moynihan was quoted as saying something similar, that you're entitled to your opinion but not to your own facts. And that unfortunately, with sort of the way the filter bubbles and the algorithms work now, people don't even realize that they have different sets of facts. And that actually, that's what I'm gonna try to do with my students next week, is talk to them about filter bubbles and kind of show them, how different. Because it was kind of funny. I wanted to talk about sort of the political economic situation leading to the election this week, like I said earlier, and I was able to find, I went out to, I Googled, I did all the search terms I could think of, and I was able to find that that Substack article by Reich, but I wasn't able to find an equivalent expression of the right position. So I was able to find this Reich thing, kind of coming from the center left, and I was looking for a sort of a center right expression that I could do a kind of point counterpoint thing, and I wasn't able to find it, and I've got to assume that they exist, and I just wasn't able to find it because it's not accessible to me based on my history on the web. Elon, angel of death. Yeah.
I mean, going quickly back to the book, like it didn't. I felt like it didn't have very much kind of. We didn't get very far with the sort of who did this.
Mm-hmm.
There was I think he mentioned Herbert Gans, like saying that like poverty must exist and persist because it's serving a function within American society, but we didn't get any investigation or kind of further thinking about that. I mean that's very pertinent to where we are now.
Yeah,
where we have like people's real time term wages have plateaued or gone down, and have a system that seems to like keep this system running by actually separating people and making the political differences much more intransigent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree, and I think the focus on and I sort of appreciate that there are biases and heuristics, and I've been curious about them over the last several years, and I've read Kahneman's book and stuff, but it seemed like it was almost not going far enough to just say, well, okay, we have these ways that we think that sort of get in our way. I was a little dissatisfied with that.
Yeah, I've heard two of the three authors on YouTube giving speeches, and it seemed their primary purpose in this book was to categorize these stereotypes, these misconceptions of poverty, people in poverty, and then be more descriptive as they did in the succeeding sections. Yeah, their solutions seemed a little weak or pointing to them. So yeah, I agree. But I don't think that was their initial purpose.
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree, John. I recall them saying that they wanted to point these things out, and that they weren't true. That was a step forward. But
yeah,
in order for that to happen, it needs to get out of the book and into the general distribution somehow.
Yeah. And well, and I kind of agree with them that there is some value. I mean, they bring up, Jacob Riis, running around and taking photographs, and and that 1890 book, How the Other Half Lives, although there weren't photographs in that, there were engravings based on photographs. But I think that was a kind of a milestone for New Yorkers, right? Was, because he had he had come over and he had been writing and writing all of these kind of melodramatic stories of, of poor people, and, for the papers, and he wasn't getting any traction, right? But then when he produced photo, he grabbed a camera and took pictures. Then that seemed to move the needle a little bit. It seemed to actually kind of demonstrate to people in a way that they could, maybe just because it was visual, more viscerally kind of see the, all of the people on the, on the bunk beds in the little room, the immigrant boarding house, and, and the tough guys on, Mulberry Street or whatever it was, in the 5 Points. That was a change, and that they were hoping for some kind of equivalent, moment in, but they didn't identify what it would be. Maybe it's, we used to, a couple of years ago, we had hopes that, that social media, like the Arab Spring, and, that sort of thing was gonna fix this. Is it too late? Are we too media saturated now to be shocked by anything?
Oh,
Well, I think you're right earlier when you say we're media divided, maybe more and saturated, but we're saturated and divided. And I happen to have this real negative reaction to political ads, and because I just think I've been on this bender trying to complain about lies in political ads, and I just read this thing. One of the news was explaining that you can't assume that political ads will work like ads in other areas. So you can't claim it's against the law to claim that cigarettes are good for you, but it's not necessarily against the law to make a to use a political ad and tell a lie. And that's because different laws kind of govern political speech from whatever that other kind of speech is, the promoting ads. And part of it, I mean, that's part of it. And then someone was talking, I was reading about or listening to someone complain about the different political parties and their advertisements. And my version of what they were saying is Republicans have figured out that you need a simple message and you just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. Democrats keep trying to explain things, and to explain things that aren't simple requires complexity, and nobody wants to try to process complexity. And that's some things that are, so normally, I lean toward, yes, there's an explanation for this, but you got to be willing to consider this and this and this. That's an educator's kind of approach to explanation, to reaching the truth. The truth is complex, but we can explain it, and here's what you have to think about, and it all kind of fits together, and this is the way it works. But people, unfortunately, don't seem to want to hear that. I have one other, again, I talked before about, and I guess a couple of people did, about kind of the pessimism of the present going into the election, and that kind of came from my analysis of that final chapter when you actually looked at, okay, so how many of these changes could happen without political will, for example, to establish to establish a livable wage, which what did they say, 15 and a quarter was their estimate of an absolute, well, that's not going to happen unless it's required.
Right.
And then a lot of the other things, education, social safety net, et cetera, they all require changes in the tax laws, because if those things are going to happen, the money has to come from somewhere. So those are all factors that require political will. The only non-political will thing that I could kind of find in that chapter was, well, maybe unions could fix it, but
Mhm.
the unions, I mean, they are coming back,
Mhm.
and they also now seem to be coming back in areas that I find annoying. And in Minnesota right now, the hospital people seem to, which I don't know. I don't necessarily see hospital people as underpaid, but that seems to be the union making the most noise.
Don't mess with your Starbucks either, huh?
Well, that's right. I forgot.
Right.
Starbucks. You're right.
Well, and maybe part of this is one of the things that's been sort of striking to me in the last couple of cycles has been the amount of attention, the amount of focus paid on national contests, right?
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to state or county or local. And I'm sort of reminded of what Graeber and Wengrow, I think both of them probably in The Dawn of Everything, had said that that people act differently at different scales, on a spectrum from sort of free market capitalist democracy to sort of socialist or communist or whatever. So one of the so it does seem to me that it's a heavy lift if you're going to have a national education policy supported by federal income tax or something like that, which is, I mean, ironic in a way, because we don't seem to have a problem sending $40 billion to Ukraine. So there do seem to be things that that just kind of happen automatically, and other things that you have to really argue for and beg for and make a case about. But I wonder if there are ways to sort of decouple some of these things, some of these ways of helping people from from kind of these national political questions. If maybe that's an area of potential leverage.
Yeah, but even that seems to be moving in the opposite direction. I forgot in my list education, universities and local, secondary schools.
Mm-hmm.
The pressure there also now seems to be political. And you mentioned local. I mean, that's just that phenomena you're talking about. Just the interest in local school board elections now is becoming very political.
Yeah, that's true. And we do. I mean, it does seem, to go back to your earlier point, that that one side is better at sort of going for the gut, right?
Mhm.
I'm thinking like in Minnesota right now, we've got this governor's campaign where where we've got sort of a governor, an incumbent, a Democratic incumbent, who's kind of an intelligent guy, comes from education, and is kind of his, one of his sort of reactions to things is, kind of, Mark, what you were saying. Well, it's complicated, and there are a lot of factors, and a lot of, there's a lot of pieces in play, and the challenger is, basically just showing, ad after ad. I don't watch that much TV, so I don't see a lot of them, but every one I see has got, buildings burning during the George Floyd riots, right? Which, which of course happened on the incumbent's watch, and so he's to blame for it, right? And so it's a very simple. I mean, that's the that's kind of the simplest, most visceral kind of equation.
Yeah.
So
that and fentanyl, the colored fentanyl pills that supposedly the Walls is somehow allowed to be distributed.
Well, that means Walls killed Prince.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dang. Yeah, because there's a coincidence of timing, that the opioid crisis happens while somebody is in a position of it, not even, I mean, of what kind of authority, of nominal. We also, I mean, we've been talking for the last 90 minutes about Clinton and Trump and Obama, and how much are these guys actually pulling the levers of power, and how much are they dancing on the strings of the whatever you want to call it, the donor class, or the oligarchs, or whatever, who are behind them all.
Yeah, Wright would say the oligarchs.
Yeah, he did, and then he didn't. He would say the oligarchs without naming names, right? It's very unspecific about who the oligarchs we have to worry about are. Although he does mention, it's okay to mention, the Koch brothers. But then when you
George Soros.
Yeah. Well, the other side will mention George Soros.
The other side's got Soros.
Well, his book, The System, I think mentions several more.
Yeah.
But yeah, he gave a full explanation of his view of the oligarchs.
Yeah. Well, and at least, so credit to him to at least have done that. The thing I was disappointed about in the article was, he says, it's Christian Sinema, it's Joe Manchin. It's like, well, wait a minute. We had a Democrat in the White House. We had a majority in the Senate. We had close to a supermajority in the House. And we didn't even, and we had the squad, right? And we didn't even force the vote on reelecting Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, which was completely doable, right? So who's really who's responsible? Who's complicit?
It's like the last person who scores the winning point for the team, and they are the hero.
Right, and they're carried off. They're carried off on the shoulders of the team.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and given all of that, given all of those layers of institution preventing change, where should attention and effort be focused? And that's maybe, so maybe I'm being overly critical about, about this book, that it doesn't, I mean, they do mention some things. They mention, they and he did go, or they did go to, UBI in the last chapter. So.
Well, I've always thought unemployment had been somewhat manipulated. So that companies had a ready stock of employable people. And it seemed to me, this is sort of surface, I didn't really dig into this, but it seemed to me that when unemployment got pretty low, people started talking about inflation, and they had to put the brakes on employment stuff and on corporations, and these were things all really to attack the poor. Because they were the recently unemployed. They were the ones that were left without their musical chairs. And I thought that was just a wonderful analogy. And I've heard two of the authors talk about that on YouTube. But they want to point to the structural things that create the losers, not the losers themselves.
Right. Yeah, I thought that was a powerful element of the book overall. That and the kind of in and out of poverty nature, right? That there isn't a population that we have to, that is the poor, that we have to, think about, that, that it's, a growing kind of swath of population.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That find themselves in, in this place where they can be vulnerable. And it does seem like that is, that there are a variety of ways out of that, right? The kind of, we talked last week a little bit about, sort of the rental the payment stream versus ownership cultures. And so I think that's a thing that, the other thing that kind of strikes me about this book is they do kind of dip back into, I mean, you see Wright Mills all over the place, right? And, and these kind of older people who were sort of criticizing, not only the power elite, but also, sort of the way the economy was organized, I mean, going on 50 years ago. So that would be interesting to kind of look more at, or look more deeply at, or more closely at, is, sort of what are the similarities and differences between, what was happening when Mills was writing, because we seem to have these, again, it seems to go in waves, right? So we have these muckrakers in the in the 1920s, then we have these kind of sociology of power, people in the in the 50s and 60s, and then another half a century goes by, and now we're kind of back to that. It's interesting.
Yeah, and another thing that seems to affect the poor here in California, whenever they want to create income, they don't talk about the income tax. They talk about things like sales tax or tax on gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the highest prices on gasoline in the country.
And those things are very regressive. Yeah.
Very regressive, right? But to explain that to somebody, you get into the complexity and the nuance.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean percent of disposable income? What does that mean? I just know, well, if I'm paying more tax at the pump, it's to go to the roads, which maybe part of it does or not. But there seems to be a willingness to accept this by a lot of voters, as opposed to trying to do something that is more equitable in terms of disposable income. So it's quite curious that very thing, the willingness to accept a tax, but it has to be regressive, is prominent. I'm not sure about the other states, or countries.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if that is because it's imagined as being discretionary, how much gasoline you buy.
Yeah, I guess I think it goes back to this fundamental idea of how people consider fairness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That fairness is only about what's equally applied, which in certain matters of law, that's what you have to do. But when you think of fairness as what people are capable of paying, that's quite different. And a lot of people rebel against that.
Yeah.
Plain favoritism and this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You see it in public education all the time. A student with special needs, they're going to get special, not lowering standards, but they're going to get extra support than others because that's what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And so, parents will see this as unfair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it goes to the regressive things, and like flat tax. Remember, Forbes made a big deal about the flat tax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wonder what the tax is on jet fuel.
Jet fuel, which actually still contains lead. Just as an aside. Yeah. Flat tax, there were some estimates that suggested it might have worked if everybody actually would have paid.
If there were no deductions and
right, and no exemptions and no tax havens and shelters and ways of cheating. Which is another problem, which is another issue, right? That we, okay, it's complicated, right? We have these, we fight over these rules and about whether they're just or not, or equitable or not. And then they're not actually what we do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So how, and so there's a reaction to that, or psychologically, right? There's a reaction to that. How much are you willing to fight over this if you know that, well, this is all just kind of window dressing, right? This is all just something that we say and not anything that we do.
Yeah, how many countries use a postcard to submit your tax returns?
Yeah. No. Yeah, how many people? Well, how many people use a 1040 EZ form, which is basically a postcard?
I imagine a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta agree. So anyway, it is 11:37 for me. Louis, you may have come in when you did because you thought we had already changed time, which we didn't yet.
Yeah, I guess that's us in Europe. We went our clocks went.
Oh, you already switched your clocks.
Yeah,
Oh,
we switched last week.
I'm
We
sorry.
switched last weekend. So, I did get the idea that I was coming in on time, but like clearly.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, we switch tonight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
we'll be back in the right.
We'll be back on. So we'll be back. That means we'll be back to UTC -5, or will it be 6? We need to figure that out. All right, I'll double check.
I don't know exactly.
Yeah. All right.
6.
Right.
6 for you, 5 for me.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was going to be 6, but I thought it was going to be tomorrow, and I thought you hadn't changed. So, yeah, my mistake. So,
Dan, how do we get that book or the PDF or what?
I will. Well, I will send it to you, and then I guess what I will do is I'll send out a kind of a message to the whole the whole mailing list of, because we used to have a lot of people when we were talking about things like sunk errands and stuff, and some of those folks might want to come back to talk about this. So Louis, what we're talking about is that the plan, I think, is going to be to break for 3 weeks, and then on December 3rd to begin talking about Scott Scheper's book. So we're going back to note making, Zettelkasten. Now there's been some talk. There was some talk earlier about how long we should take to do this. It's a long book, but there might be some sections of it that are more skimmable than readable. So I'm going to try to look at that in the next few days, and then maybe what I'll do is I'll put my suggestion up in the community page in the vault, and we can kind of weigh in on that. And then since I have 3 weeks, I can wait a week and a half or so to announce to everybody else that this is going to be beginning. But in the meantime, yeah, I can send out the PDF and the I don't know if it'll work if I just send the link to the Google. I don't really understand Google that well. So I think what I'll do is I'll download it and I'll send you. I'll put it in my Dropbox, and then I'll basically give book club members invitation access to the. I'll just put it in the same Dropbox folder that you already have access to, that the Obsidian Vault is in. I'm sorry, I'm thinking out loud. I don't need to bore you with this. But yeah, I'll make that available in the next couple of days, so you can start checking it out. All right, and I will post a lot of good links on here. Thanks, Pat, and everybody else. I will put these up momentarily in the vault as well. Any last words?
Vote.
Vote, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Vote.
Already have. Oh, I guess it's already on Amazon as paperback.
Is it shipping?
Oh, no.
Or is it just
No, I'm sorry, I misread that.
Yeah, because I have pre-ordered it and they haven't emailed me yet that it's available. Yeah, I think it will be a fun read. I am gonna I told Scott that I would, that I'd be posting videos of it. So So it'll be interesting to see how he reacts to our reaction. Because I imagine there will be some moments when we don't really buy his whole pitch.
Well, at least you'll get publicity from us.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he will. Yeah, and I think I don't know if he's I think he's kind of self-publishing this, although I think his version of self-publishing actually involved contracting with somebody to print the book and not running it through a print on demand, Amazon or Ingram or anything like that. So it's a different thing, I guess. There are a lot of ways to get things out in the world. So yeah. So, and I'm not sure if he's doing if he's doing any type of a book tour, or he's going to go see, Lex Friedman or what. I assume he's not going to go see Joe Rogan, but yeah. And I don't know what's going to happen with Elon and Twitter. It seems like there's a lot of somebody turned up the heat under that pot.
I'm looking for him to lose $22 billion.
You're looking forward to what?
To lose $22 billion. Cut the value of Twitter in half. Cut the employees in half. Cut the value in half.
Yeah.
The most disgusting thing that I read was he was firing all the people that he did before November 1st. November 1st was the day they all got their big bonuses, stock bonuses.
Oh, and invested? Yeah.
Yep.
The new bird for Twitter is the vulture.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how this works out to be a good thing for him. I think that he was probably hoping, when he pulled back, that he wouldn't have to go through with it. And then, he found himself sort of forced to go through with it. So this may be a little bit of a kind of a peevish reaction to that too.
Yes, as business decisions go, what he's been doing hasn't made any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a guy who sort of made his name for, sort of being this scientist who worked from first principles and all of that, which I think you can make a credible argument that he did that with, SpaceX to a great extent, and Tesla maybe to a lesser, but still, kind of meaningful extent. This doesn't seem to make sense.
No, I heard it's completely impulsive.
Yeah. I hope this isn't the moment when Howard Hughes begins, urinating in bottles. So yeah. So on that note, I guess we should take a 3-week hiatus. And who knows, maybe things will be different when we reconvene.
Yeah, we'll see.
Who knows?
Yeah.
And to the better or worse.
Yeah,
that's true.
Don't know. Yep.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. You too.
Bye.
See you soon.
Bye. And thanks again, Dan, for doing this.
You
Yeah,
bet.
Dan.
You bet. Take care.
See you in 3 weeks.